Burma was once one of Southeast Asia's most developed nations. Yet now, while many of its neighbours look to embrace democracy and human rights, the country, now known as Myanmar, spirals backwards into the dark ages. The military-led government continues to refuse its people the right to freedom and thought, silencing those who would question its rules with harsh sentences under a penal system that barely distinguishes its citizens from animals. In 1948, Burma gained its independence after being colonized by the British Empire for more than 100 years. Aung San, the national leader, who had fought to gain independence, was assassinated 1 year before it was due. After independence, Burma had a parliamentary democracy system for 10 years. However, by the early 60s, Burma was under military dictatorship when a military coup led by General Ne Win brought the army to power. The full ramifications of this change in government was brought to light in 1988, when people around the country demonstrated for democracy against a military regime which had ruled the country for almost 3 decades. Thousands of people were killed as a result of the regime's brutal crackdown on the protesters. The more the People's Democracy Movement increases, the harsher the regime's crackdown follows. As a result, the world has been made more aware of the plight of the people in Burma. Aung San Suu Kyi, Nobel Peace Prize winner and daughter of national leader Aung San, has become the leader of the movement that seeks to bring democracy and freedom to the country. In 1990, the military regime responded to the uprising by holding elections, which resulted in a landslide victory by the NLD, headed by Aung San Suu Kyi. Following the election, the military refused, and still refuses, to relinquish power to the NLD. Instead, they imprison activists, often sentencing them to life and even to death.
In 1998, I was arrested once again. That time I wasn't sent to prison. I was sent to a so-called government guest house. I had to stay there 3 years. The NLD demanded the junta set up a parliament within 60 days, comprising of the elected MPs in the whole country. But they all got detained. However, the junta informed the international community that the elected MPs were in these guest houses for so-called talks. Actually, guest houses are just detention centres. I was put in the compound of the 88 Division. I and other MPs who were elected were detained there.
As I was sentenced under state protection law, I was treated as a rebel. I was put alone. They didn't allow me to walk outside my cell except when I was taken to have a shower. Moreover, prison staff were ordered to stay away from my cell because they would secretly provide me some snacks and meals. After the 1962 military coup, political prisoners faced cruel torture and ill treatment. After 1988, many people were put in prison for their political beliefs, the greatest number in Burma's history. On the one hand, the regime has signed ceasefire agreements with many ethnic armed groups, some of which are known narcotics producers, while on the other hand, it cracks down on the activists who simply call for democracy in a peaceful and non-violent way. Although the international community has attempted to free Burma from the repressive regime, yet another violent massacre took place on May 30th, 2003. The regime launched a terrorist attack on peaceful democracy activists, including Aung San Suu Kyi, in Dapa Yin Township, resulting in at least 70 activists killed, hundreds detained, and many still missing. Even Aung San Suu Kyi, who actively advocates on behalf of prisoners to the internal and international community, was detained after the attack. Now she too is yet again a political prisoner for the third time. Once in 1989 for 7 years, then in 2000, and now again in 2003.
The release of political prisoners is important because it means a return to political normalcy. Unless political organizations are free to go about their work unhindered and unintimidated by the authorities, we can never say that we have started the process towards change to democracy.
In the women's ward, there was space for only 100 prisoners. However, I saw some 300 women there. There were many sex workers. It was very overcrowded. When I got arrested, I was not allowed to take any blankets or a spare dress. As I am a woman, my menstruation period would come, and it was the most shameful time in my life. The clinic was run every Friday. A woman was sick, and she requested to go there for treatment. She was allowed to go there only after prison staff scolded her. She came back later. Soon after, she took some pills and then died. There is no country without a prison. A country's prison conditions reflect on what sort of government rules that country. A prison should be a correction department, a place to cure people who have done wrong against society and reform them. Many people who committed crimes are in prison throughout the world, and their rights are respected. However, in countries like Burma, a prison is a place for the government to crack down on people in order to stay in power for a longer period. The dictatorship in power in Burma is only interested in perpetuating its own survival at the cost of the people's rights. Burma has 39 prisons. The most ancient one is Sittwe Prison, located in western Burma and 500 miles from the capital, Rangoon. It was built by the British government after the First Anglo-Burma War. Minko Naing, a student leader, well known after the 1988 People Uprising, is incarcerated in this prison. He should have been released in 1999, but he remains in prison, as the regime falsely labels him dangerous to the country. He is the most senior of the activists arrested since 1988. His imprisonment period has been over 14 years. Additionally, some members of armed ethnic resistance groups who have been struggling for their freedom, such as Karen and Arakan, have been in prison for more than 20 years.
When I was sent to Thayat prison as a criminal, I was sentenced under Article 392 of the Criminal Code. I was sentenced as a supposed robber. The regime just wanted to destroy my dignity. You see, political prisoners and criminals do not have the same rights. Political prisoners are systematically oppressed. In family visits, we could only talk to our family members for just 15 minutes, and whatever we talked about was noted and recorded.
The largest prison is Insane, located in northern Rangoon. It was built in 1892 during the British colonial period. Approximately 10,000 inmates languish in that prison. Many well-known or respected people are in that prison for their political beliefs.
If people are going to be arrested for expressing their opinions, their political opinions, then how can we say that there is a hope for political freedom in Burma? And without political freedom, how can there be democracy? So we repeat again and again, we reiterate that the release of political prisoners is the most important thing for all those who truly wish to bring about change in Burma.
I feel so sorry for Aung San Suu Kyi that she is now under arrest. It's nonsense to say that political prisoners are favoured. I sympathise with Aung San Suu Kyi. I know how she feels, as I am a former political prisoner. The regime usually claims that political prisoners are not tortured. I met 3 other female political prisoners when I was in prison. 2 of them were forced to face the wall. They were beaten with canes. Isn't that torture? A person in prison for any reason has to experience for the first time what is called ponzan, or in prison terminology, a set of different submissive positions that prisoners must assume on command. Prisoners must lower their gaze to the floor, avoiding eye contact with the guards. This was introduced in the British colonial period for security reasons. Under the regime's rule, it's intentionally used to break down one's dignity and values. The current prison conditions in Burma conform to less than 10% of the standard minimum rules for the treatment of prisoners, adopted by the first UN Congress on the Offenders, held at Geneva in 1957. Burma is a Theravada Buddhist country. However, the regime doesn't favour Buddhist monks. If a monk participates in the democracy movement, he is also sent to prison, where he is forcibly disrobed, and then treated just like other prisoners. Activists who become prisoners for their beliefs are forced to endure human rights abuses. Talking to other prisoners from neighbouring cells is a crime according to the prison authority. If they talk, they are beaten. Some have gone insane due to this inhumane treatment. Political prisoners face not only imprisonment, but also different sorts of punishment in prisons. One of the punishments is putting a 6-kilogram iron shackle on the legs. Sometimes an iron stick is fixed horizontally between the shackled legs of prisoners, forcing them to stand permanently with legs apart. Another punishment is solitary confinement. A prisoner in solitary confinement is not allowed to have family visits, is prevented from taking a shower for 1 month or more. The small pot used as a toilet is rarely emptied, so it is often overflowing with the prisoner's waste, filling the cell with filth and spreading disease. Due to this repression, political prisoners often have to strike for prisoners' rights. A hunger strike is the harshest method.
Why and when were there hunger strikes in prison? Well, we had hunger strikes when the authorities brutally oppressed the political prisoners. We tried to gain our rights by having hunger strikes. There were many hunger strikes under this repressive government. Under the old socialist regime, the hunger strikes on Coco Island prison were well known. One lasted 52 days, and 8 political prisoners died during that time. Sometimes a hunger strike doesn't work. Sometimes, on the other hand, it ends with success. In 1971, there was a strike on Coco Island prison. Dozens of political prisoners died in the hunger strikes. Yes, and finally they did win. And the prisoners on that island were taken away. And so that particular strike ended with success.
When the prisoners are not being harassed, they fill the monotony by playing chess, smoking, talking, and making statues using soap cake. If they have the chance, they make bags using pieces of plastic. They use plastic sheets and paper from cigarette butts to write on, something which is forbidden in Burmese prisons. Despite these strict conditions, many political prisoners take the risk of secretly studying subjects such as the English language.
When I was 14, I was sentenced to 3 years imprisonment for the first time. One day we, that is 250 prisoners, had to move to another prison. Our legs were put in iron shackles. There was one shackle for 2 prisoners. And although we reached the other prison, the authorities never removed the shackles for many days. In the new place, it was very cold, as it was winter. We were uncomfortable under the bad weather. Moreover, we were also really uncomfortable in these terrible iron shackles. And we were all forced to work. We had to work in a pig feeding project. We had to clean the pig droppings. We had to clean the ditch, carry the rice bags and the bricks. When I was released, I contacted my former headmistress. I was rejected from continuing school, as I was away from education for 7 years, and I then contacted the local military intelligence officials on that issue. They told me that I needed to inform them about the political movements and exile activists who I knew. They also told me they would manage my high school education if I agreed to help them. I rejected their proposal, but as a result, I had to quit my education.
Those who are at liberty to express their thoughts, those who are at liberty to associate freely with others, they do not know what it is like to live in a society where you can be imprisoned for saying the wrong things, for associating with the wrong people. Wrong, let me say, in the eyes of the authorities. If you cannot say what you wish, then it means that you are not free, either as an individual or as a member of a political society.
After 1988, officials from the United Nations visited prisons to investigate the abuses on political prisoners. They tried their best to improve prison conditions. However, they themselves experienced human rights violations. Early in 2003, Mr. Pinero, United Nations Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in Burma, was electronically bugged while he had a private interview with political prisoners in insane prison. I felt a little bit depressed at that time, as I was put alone in the cell. I had the feeling that I must have looked like a horrified person, as the prison staff dared not to look at me. The prison authorities intentionally placed me like that in order to make me feel depressed. I didn't talk to anyone, as I was put alone for a long time. I sometimes wanted to cry out a song so loudly. My cell was totally hot. In summer, I felt like I was sitting in an oven. I got hypertension because of the terrible heat. The weather made it very hard for me. In cold season, it was freezing. In addition, the ventilation was so bad. Wherever I looked, there were walls. Prisons can have human rights abuses all over the world. However, abuses in Burmese prisons are the worst. A small pot is a toilet for everybody in the cell. There is one water pot in the cell, which they have to use to both clean themselves and for drinking. They have 2 improper meals a day in the dirty cell. Usually rice with bean soup and fish paste provides breakfast. For dinner, the meals are so-called vegetable soup and fish paste. Every Thursday evening, each prisoner receives a piece of fried meat. As prisoners live on under these conditions for several months and years, they usually succumb to different sorts of diseases due to malnutrition. Many political prisoners have died in prison as they did not receive proper medical treatment. After 1988, at least 82 political prisoners died in prison as a result of torture and ill treatment. More died after their release because of the diseases that they got in prison.
I heard the door open. They shouted my name and asked me to bring a sarong. They put it on my head and tied it round my neck. I couldn't see anything, and I was handcuffed behind my back. And when we reached the interrogation hall, I was ordered, lie down and face the floor. And after the order, there were beatings on my buttocks and my legs. I don't know how many of them beat me. What I knew was I received some 30 beatings the first time. And then there was a pause. I thought they'd stopped. And then the second time, they beat me in the same way again and again. I still hurt a little bit where they kicked me, using the head of a stone. In the movies, sometimes you will see someone is kicked. The body will jump up, and there will be a lot of pain. But in my case, there was no need to be an actor like in the film. I jumped up, and it really severely hurt me.
The majority of activists participate again in the democracy movement after their release. Some of them were arrested again. If they are not arrested, they fear being arrested by the military intelligence at any time. They are often harassed in their business and social activities. Some former political prisoners left their home and family for other countries as the military intelligence tried to arrest them again. Most of them are now on the Thai-Burma border.
We are
not happy here in Thailand. Wherever we go, we are afraid of being arrested. Who is to blame? We don't want to stay in others' countries. We want to stay in our own country. However, we are here, as Burma is ruled by bad rulers.
Our political prisoners have not committed more crimes than those of expressing their political beliefs, either through word or through action. Some of our political prisoners were arrested on grounds other than those associated with political activities. But we all know that the real reason for the imprisonment was their political affiliations. Because of that, we insist that the release of political prisoners is necessary if the process of reconciliation is to go forward to a point where it becomes truly irreversible. Until the process becomes truly irreversible, none of us can afford to be complacent. Until all our political prisoners are free, none of us can say that Burma is now truly on the road towards democratic change. Because of that, we would like to call upon everybody who cares for the future of Burma to support the request, the demand for the release of all political prisoners speedily and unconditionally. They should be released as soon as possible, that they may resume their political activities, that they may live by their political beliefs unhindered and unoppressed.
In 2000, former political prisoners on the Thai-Burma border set up the Assistance Association for Political Prisoners Burma, also known as the AAPP.
After I fled to the Thai-Burma border, I thought of what I could do for the democratic struggle. I consulted activists from other different organizations, and finally we discussed about the situation of political prisoners in prison, all the human rights violations by the junta, and how we can help those suffering. And at last, the beginning of 2000, the 11th anniversary of Minko Nai's arrest, a student leader in Burma, we set up AAPP. The current economic and political and educational situation in Burma has devastated everyone, and the majority of released political prisoners are in fact under surveillance. Military intelligence personnel always watches whatever they do, whether they're in business or in education. The military intelligence visit former political prisoners' homes and question them. And when they do, former political prisoners feel anxious about being rearrested, because once you've been a prisoner, you're always a prisoner in Burma. Some people just cannot bear such continuous harassment, but some are rearrested and some are hiding, others are trying to go into hiding. They contact opposition groups across the border. And nowadays the number of former political prisoners fleeing to the border areas is dramatically increasing.
There are
three kinds of work in the AAPP. Firstly, there are internal Burma activities. Secondly, there are the Thailand border activities. And finally, there are the international activities. When we look at the inside work, we can see monitoring of the situation of political prisoners in Burmese prisons and assisting them as much as we can. And moreover, there is an organization that can inspect Burmese prisons. The International Committee of the Red Cross inspects prisons and sometimes reports on what it finds. And as the ICRC visits prisons, we need to know what ICRC is doing and what ICRC is reporting to the international community. Are the ICRC's reports really similar and true to what goes on inside the prison? In fact, we need to monitor the ICRC itself. This is one of our new activities. We're trying to find ways to help political prisoners and former political prisoners. However, we can only assist a very limited number of former political prisoners because of the lack of funding. And if you want to help us, please visit our website, which is www.aapp.org, to know more details. The highest international activity of the AAPP is attending the United Nations Commission on Human Rights conferences, which are held every March until April in Geneva. AAPP has been attending that conference since 2002. At the UNCHR conference, we could present a list of political prisoners and the real situation of political prisoners to diplomats from different nations. So now there are stronger resolutions passed on political prisoners issues by the UNCHR. I myself believe that even though AAPP is only working on human rights work, it does make a great contribution to the Burmese struggle for restoring democracy and human rights in the country. And moreover, this is the right time to focus on the release of all political prisoners, immediately and unconditionally.
The AAPP has been reporting on the condition of political prisoners based on their own experiences and the information they receive. Once outside the prison walls, former political prisoners will continue to work for the freedom of all political prisoners who have been unfairly put in prisons. The issue of political prisoners is directly related to the Burmese political situation. When all the political prisoners are free, Burma will be a democratic country. In the meantime, life for all the people of Burma is behind a prison wall.
Towards that end, we have been working since the party was founded, because from the very inception we have had to face political persecution and imprisonment. Towards that end, we will go on working, and we hope that all our friends everywhere will support us in our endeavors. Thank you.
I've not been touched for 7 years. For 7 years, I've been touched. All the times I have learned to know the meaning of untouchable. And that's not why I can call the things that have touched me.